You sit before me with your heart open, and I see in your eyes the reflection of an ancient wound. It is not merely personal, but archetypal, a wound that echoes through centuries of human longing and betrayal. You tell me that you love those who wound you, that your heart returns again and again to the very hand that strikes it. And I tell you, this is no accident. This is no mere weakness. This is the work of the psyche unfolding its darkest riddle, empathy. When untethered from consciousness, can become a binding chain. It can keep you locked in a cycle where love is indistinguishable from suffering, where tenderness is fused with violence, where forgiveness becomes a prison instead of a liberation. Why does the empath return? Why do you again and again offer your light to those who feed on it until you are emptied? To answer, we must descend, as always, into the underworld of the soul, for the unconscious does not play with half-truths. It is brutal, merciless, and yet profoundly just. It reveals what you cannot bear to see in daylight. In every relationship where you suffer, there is a dream unfolding, a myth reenacted, a forgotten memory embodied in flesh. Let us imagine for a moment that you are Persephone, wandering in the fields, filled with innocence, and Hades rises up to drag you into the depths. The empath, too, is seized by dark forces, wearing human faces. And like Persephone, you remain tied to the underworld, bound by the seeds you have eaten in its darkness. Those seeds are your memories, your traumas, the taste of early love that came entwined with cruelty. You cannot leave because part of you has learned to call pain home. And I must speak to you not only of psychology, but of alchemy. For the soul is an alchemical furnace. The empath is often the child who once bore witness to unbearable storms, the rage of a parent, the cold indifference of a caretaker, the silence that cut deeper than any lash. And in the child's psyche, something extraordinary happened. To survive, you opened your inner senses wider, wider than most could bear, until you felt the emotions of others more vividly than your own. Your nervous system became a tuning fork to the collective unconscious around you. You learned to read the room, to sense the unspoken, to anticipate danger. This saved you, yes, but it also cursed you. For now, your love is drawn like a magnet to those whose chaos resonates with that old frequency. And so you find yourself, again and again, in the arms of those who remind you unconsciously of the first figures who wounded you. You love them not because they deserve love, but because your shadow insists that unfinished business must be completed. The psyche does not let go of what is unresolved. It repeats, it insists, it drives you into reenactments until you awaken. This is my darkest warning. If you do not make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. The empath who does not awaken becomes a sacrifice at the altar of other people's shadows. You will love the abuser, defend the narcissist, nurture the vampire until you collapse and you will call this collapse devotion, but it is not devotion, it is possession. Do you hear that word? Possession. Not in the crude sense of devils with horns, but in the true psychological sense. You are possessed by the archetype of the healer, the martyr, perhaps even the Christ figure, who takes upon themselves the sins of the other. But this archetype, when not integrated, demands blood. It demands that you bleed endlessly into the wounds of others. It tells you that your worth is measured by how much you endure, and so you stay and you love and you suffer and you think you are noble, but you are not noble. You are trapped. Now, the question rises from within you. How do I escape? How do I love without binding myself to pain? I must tell you, there is no simple escape, for the shadow does not vanish by denial. You cannot merely say, I will no longer love those who hurt me, and believe that the unconscious will comply. No, the shadow demands confrontation. You must descend into yourself, into the chamber where your first memories of love are fused with rejection, where tenderness was braided with neglect. There you will find the archetype that rules you. Perhaps it is the mother wound, perhaps the father wound, perhaps the neglected inner child who still believes that if they are loving enough, patient enough, forgiving enough, then one day the tyrant will soften, the cold one will warm, the abuser will finally cradle them. That fantasy is your prison. I recall the dreams of countless patients who carried this pattern, dreams of wandering through ruined houses, searching for someone who never comes, dreams of doors that open into empty rooms, dreams of endless corridors with voices echoing but no bodies to embrace. These dreams are the psyche's way of saying, you are lost in the labyrinth of unfulfilled love. And the minotaur you meet in that labyrinth wears the face of your lover, your friend, your parent, your enemy. Always it is the same, wearing different masks. You must understand that empathy, when unconscious, is not love. It is compulsion. True love arises when the self, the divine center of the psyche, radiates outward. Compulsion arises when the shadow drives you toward the repetition of old pain. And so the task of the empath is to discern, am I giving from the self? Or am I repeating from the wound? The alchemists spoke of the conjunctio oppositorum, the union of opposites. They knew that transformation comes when light and dark are held together, not when light pretends the dark does not exist. You, too, must hold both. Your gift of empathy and your wound of compulsion. To love without losing yourself, you must let the inner child grieve. You must let the abandoned one weep for the love that will never come from those who hurt them. You must bury that dream like a funeral rite. Only then does the repetition loosen its grip. Perhaps you resist this truth. Perhaps you say, but I see the good in them. I see their pain. I see their potential, and I will tell you, yes, you see rightly, But you must also see your blindness. You confuse potential with reality. You fall in love not with the person before you, but with the archetypal possibility of their healing. You mistake your projection for their being. You love the dream of who they could be, and in doing so, you betray yourself. Listen carefully. The empath who endlessly forgives is not merciful but afraid. Afraid that if they set boundaries, they will be abandoned. Afraid that if they stop giving, they will no longer be needed. Afraid that their worth exists only in what they provide. These fears are the shackles forged in childhood, and you carry them into every bond. And so I say to you, your empathy must be baptized in fire. It must pass through the crucible of individuation, for only when you confront your shadow, only when you see the hidden contract that keeps you chained to the abuser, can you transform empathy from a curse into a gift. The self calls you not to servitude, but to sovereignty. You are not here to be consumed by the wounded. You are here to witness them. Yes, but without losing your center, this journey is perilous, for it requires you to betray the child within, who still waits for the impossible. To say, no more, feels like betrayal, but in truth, it is liberation. You must become the parent your inner child never had. You must protect that child from further harm. You must say, I will no longer allow you to be sacrificed at the altar of someone else's healing. This is the moment when empathy is redeemed. Do you feel the weight of these words? They are heavy, but they are necessary. You cannot awaken without sorrow. You cannot heal without fire. You cannot love truly until you have faced the dark truth that your love has often been an unconscious attempt to rewrite a past that cannot be rewritten. The empaths of the world are the carriers of light, but if they do not awaken, their light becomes fuel for others' shadows. This is the darkest warning. Your gift can destroy you if it is not rooted in consciousness. But if you awaken, if you face your shadow, then empathy becomes divine sight. It allows you to see others clearly, without projection, without illusion. Then love is no longer a chain, but a flame that warms without consuming. And so I invite you into the descent, into the dream, into the labyrinth, for there you will meet the one you have been seeking all along. Not the abuser, not the lover who wounds you, not the ghost of your parents' face. You will meet yourself radiant, untouchable, eternal, and when you love from that place, no one can bind you again. The deeper we journey, the more we see that love and destruction are not enemies but twins, bound by the same thread of longing. You ask why your heart keeps running into the fire, why you love the ones who burn you. And I must show you that this is the psyche's secret alchemy, for what is repeated is never random. What hurts you is not only external, it is the reflection of what lies within. Every destructive relationship is a mirror turned toward your unconscious. And you, though you believe you are a victim, are also the seeker who cannot resist looking into that mirror. The empath loves the one who wounds because in that wound is hidden a secret piece of themselves. They are trying to retrieve it. This is why you feel a strange familiarity when you meet someone whose chaos resembles your own early pain. You call it chemistry, fate, soul connection, but often it is recognition. The shadow recognizes itself in another shadow, and so, without conscious awareness, you are drawn into the spiral, convinced that you have found love, when in truth you have found the stage on which the unfinished play of your childhood will be acted again. I remember a patient who dreamt of carrying a fragile bird in her hands. The bird's wings were broken, but she felt compelled to nurse it, to feed it, to whisper to it, even as its claws cut her skin. She awoke with both grief and devotion. Do you see the symbolism? The bird was her lover, yes, but also her inner child, wounded and gasping. Her care for him was her attempt to heal herself. Yet she could not distinguish between the two in clinging to him. She was clinging to the fragment of herself she had never saved. This is what makes the empath so loyal, so forgiving, so They are not really loving the other, they are loving the broken bird within. But the psyche is merciless. It does not let you rest in illusion forever. It forces you to see that no amount of nursing can heal someone who does not choose healing. The other may even grow stronger on your devotion, only to use that strength against you. And then, finally, the dream collapses. You are left not only with pain, but with the bitter truth. The one you loved was the mask through which your unconscious tried to show you yourself. In these moments, many collapse into despair, believing love itself is cursed. But I tell you, love is not cursed. Your shadow is demanding attention. The empath is not doomed to suffer forever, but to be free. You must allow the unconscious to complete its work. You must take back what you projected onto the other. You must rescue the bird from their hands and realize it was yours all along. Do not misunderstand me. I do not say you should never love deeply, never sacrifice, never forgive. No, love requires risk, and no one can love without some suffering. But there is a difference between love that liberates and love that enslaves. Love that liberates strengthens both souls, even if it wounds them. Love that enslaves drains one to feed the other. The empath who loves the one who wounds must ask, am I being emptied or am I being expanded? If emptied, then you are not in love, you are in bondage. The mystics spoke of the soul as a flame. When two flames meet, they can dance together, each feeding the other's light. But if one flame consumes and the other only gives, soon one is extinguished. This is what happens when you mistake empathy for love. You give without measure, you absorb without limit, until your flame flickers, and the darkness that follows is unbearable. This is why I must deliver the darkest warning. If you do not awaken, your gift will kill you. Empathy without consciousness is self-destruction. It is martyrdom in the service of illusion. You will die with your song unsung, your light squandered, your soul unfinished, and yet there is hope, for the unconscious never wounds without offering the seed of transformation. The very pattern that enslaves you also contains your path to individuation. Every destructive bond is a summons to awaken. Each time you suffer, the psyche is saying, look here, this is where you are still asleep. This is where you are still chained. If you heed the call, suffering becomes a teacher. If you refuse, it becomes a jailer. I will tell you of another dream. A man dreamt he was wandering through a forest, and he came upon a wolf. The wolf was wounded, bleeding, snarling. He approached with pity, trying to soothe it, but the wolf bit his arm. He woke in terror. Over time, he realized the wolf was his own rage, buried and denied since childhood. He had sought lovers who mirrored this rage, trying to soothe them, only to be bitten again and again. When he finally faced the wolf within, when he allowed his own anger to have a voice, he no longer needed to seek it in others. The pattern dissolved. So it is with you. The one who hurts you is showing you the wolf, the bird, the broken child, the shadow. They are your mirror. To escape the mirror, you must embrace what it reflects. Only then can you choose differently. You may ask, how does one embrace the shadow? It begins with honesty, radical, brutal honesty. You must admit the truth you fear, that you have loved suffering because it felt familiar, that you have mistaken pain for passion, that you have sought redemption in the arms of those incapable of giving it. These admissions burn, but they are necessary, for without truth you cannot awaken. Then comes grief. You must grieve the love you never received, the childhood you never had, the parent who never came, the partner who never became what you dreamed. This grief is sacred. It is the funeral rite of your illusions. If you resist grief, you will cling to repetition. If you surrender to it, you will be reborn. After grief, there is fire, the fire of saying no, the fire of boundaries, the fire of refusing to play the old role. This is terrifying for the empath, for you believe that if you stop giving, you will lose love altogether. And indeed, you may lose many people, but you will also find yourself, and in finding yourself, you will find love that does not wound. This path is long, but it is the only path that leads to freedom. For in the end, the question is not why you love those who hurt you. The question is, when will you love yourself enough to stop? When will you turn your empathy inward to the broken bird, the wounded wolf, the forgotten child? When will you say, enough, no more? I tell you this, the moment you turn your gift inward, the pattern shatters. You will no longer be magnetized to the ones who hurt you. You will see them clearly, without illusion, without projection, and you will walk away, not with bitterness, but with calm, for you will know that their role in your life was not to love you, but to awaken you. And awakened, you are no longer bound. The danger lies not in feeling too much, but in refusing to recognize what those feelings are truly trying to say. The empath is not destroyed by sensitivity itself, but by blindness to its origin. When you keep loving those who wound you, you are not really seeing them. You are seeing a projection of the unconscious. It is as if you stand before a mirror, but you believe the reflection is another person. You forget that what fascinates you in them, even what terrifies you, is also within you. And the unconscious has a cruel mercy. It will not release you until you turn your gaze inward. Many times I have heard souls say, but this one is different. This time it feels destined, written in the stars, as if we knew each other in another life. They do not realize that such intensity is often the mark of shadow recognition, not destiny. The archetypes awaken with fire. When the wounded healer archetype rises, it paints the other in luminous colors, and you believe you have found salvation. But in truth, you have found the stage on which your unresolved wound will bleed again. There is something almost religious about this. You kneel before the other, as if before a god. You give offerings of time, of patience, of devotion. You endure their cruelty as if it were penance. You believe your sacrifice has meaning, that perhaps one day it will redeem them. But this is idolatry of the unconscious. You are worshipping your own shadow disguised as love. And the gods of the unconscious are not gentle. They demand suffering until you awaken. Consider the archetype of the vampire, not the childish monster of folklore, but the psychic reality it represents, the one who feeds on life force because they have not found their own source within. When you give endlessly to those who cannot give back, you are in relationship with the vampire. But you must also ask, why does part of me choose to be fed upon? Why do I open my veins so willingly? The answer is found in your earliest bonds, when perhaps the only way to receive a morsel of love was to give yourself away completely. If as a child you learned that to be loved you must suffer, then as an adult you will call suffering love. And yet, within this darkness lies the possibility of transformation. For the archetype of the vampire is not only the devourer, but also the initiator. When you finally say no, when you withdraw your blood, the vampire forces you to discover your own hidden power. It drives you inward to find the source of life that cannot be drained. Thus, the very figure that enslaves you can become the one that awakens you. I recall another dream, this one of a woman who found herself chained to a man in a burning house. She struggled, wept, begged, but could not break free. At last, she realized the key was in her own hand. She unlocked the chain, fled the flames, and awoke in terror and relief. The dream revealed what she could not admit by day, that the bond she clung to was killing her, and only she held the power to end it. This is the lesson for all empaths who remain bound to those who wound them. The key is always in your hand, though you pretend it is not. But here is the paradox. To use the key, you must betray the part of you that still longs for the burning house? For that house is not only suffering, it is also home. It is where you first learned the meaning of love. However twisted, to walk away feels like death, because you are leaving behind not just a person, but a psychic world, an entire identity built on pain. This is why so many return again and again, even when they know better. They would rather burn in the familiar than face the unknown silence of freedom. Yet freedom comes only through that silence. To step out of the burning house is to enter the wilderness of the self, where there is no guarantee, no external source of warmth, only the slow discovery of your own flame. And here is where individuation begins. For as long as you seek wholeness in the one who wounds you, you are bound. When you withdraw the projection, when you reclaim what you have given away, then you begin to live not from compulsion, but from the self. The empath's journey is therefore a descent into loneliness. You must endure the emptiness that follows when you stop feeding others with your light. You must sit with the inner child who wails for the love that will never come from those who hurt them. You must hold that child until the wailing subsides. Only then does the true alchemy begin, for out of that loneliness emerges a new strength, a center that does not depend on another's approval. Then empathy becomes clear sight rather than blind sacrifice. You may fear that this transformation will harden you, make you cold, strip you of your gift, but the opposite is true. The awakened empath is more compassionate than ever, but also more discerning. You will still feel deeply, but you will no longer be consumed. You will know the difference between love and illusion. You will give, but not at the cost of your own soul. This is the great paradox of the shadow, that what once enslaved you becomes your greatest power when integrated. The very tendency that drove you into destructive love becomes the doorway to conscious love. The bird with broken wings becomes a phoenix. The wolf that bit you becomes your ally. The vampire becomes your teacher, and you, once bound by suffering, becomes sovereign. But sovereignty is not given, it is claimed. You must choose it. Again and again, you will be tempted to return to the old patterns, for they whisper comfort in their familiarity. Again and again, you must say, no, this is not cruelty, but fidelity to your own soul. Do you see now why I call this the darkest warning? Because the empath's danger is not in what others do, but in what they themselves consent to. You are not powerless. You are complicit. You open the door. You hand over the flame. You kneel at the altar. Until you admit this, you will suffer endlessly. But once you admit it, you can change it. This is the choice before you: to remain asleep in repetition, or to awaken into freedom, to worship your wound, or to integrate it, to love blindly, or to love consciously. The unconscious will not decide for you. It will only present the mirror. What you do with that reflection is your destiny. There is a silence that comes after awakening, a silence more frightening than any cry, For when you no longer run back to the one who wounds you, when you no longer pour your soul into their emptiness, you are left with yourself, and for many, this is unbearable. The silence reveals what has always been there but hidden beneath the noise of suffering, the aching truth of your own loneliness, your own hunger, your own shadow. This is why so many relapse, why the empath returns to the one who wounds them. It is easier to endure familiar pain than to sit with the abyss of the self. But listen to me. The abyss is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It is the womb of transformation. When you stop filling it with toxic love, when you let it echo with its true emptiness, then the self begins to rise. Out of that abyss comes the gold of individuation. The alchemists knew this. They called it the nigredo, the blackness, the putrefaction, when all old forms dissolve. Only in this darkness can new life be born. And so the empath's task is not to flee the abyss, but to descend into it willingly, to say, yes, I am empty. Yes, I am lonely. Yes, I have sought love where it could never be given, to weep, to rage, to tremble in the dark, and still to remain. This is the courage that transforms. For when you endure the abyss without distraction, the archetype of the self begins to emerge. It comes as a dream, a vision, a strange calm. It whispers that you are not abandoned, that the source of love you sought outside has always been within. Do not mistake this for mere self-love in the sentimental sense. The self is not the ego patting itself on the back. The self is the living center of the psyche, the spark of divinity that unites opposites, the eternal image of wholeness. When you touch the self, you realize that you are not merely an empath, not merely a wounded child, not merely a lover bound to pain. You are an archetype in human form, a fragment of the divine, capable of holding both shadow and light without being destroyed. When this realization dawns, empathy is reborn. No longer is it a compulsion to heal others at your own expense. No longer is it a blind magnet to those who wound. Instead, it becomes clear sight. You can stand before another and feel their pain without drowning in it. You can see their shadow without confusing it with your own. You can love them, but you can also walk away. And this is true compassion, to love without illusion, to give without slavery, to see without blindness. The world needs such awakened empaths, for without them, empathy itself becomes a curse upon humanity. Entire generations repeat the cycle of loving their oppressors, forgiving the abusers, enabling the narcissists, because they cannot bear the silence of the abyss. But when one empath awakens, they break the chain. They become a mirror of truth to others. They show that it is possible to feel deeply without being consumed, to love fiercely without being bound. You may think this path will leave you isolated, but it does not. For once you have faced the abyss, you no longer cling to those who wound you. You begin to attract others who have also awakened, others who can meet you as equals. Your relationships become unions of two flames, not one consuming the other. They are not perfect, for no bond is without conflict. But they are no longer reenactments of your wound. They are laboratories of growth, crucibles of transformation, places where both souls expand. And so the question arises, how do you know when you are still trapped in the old pattern? And when you have stepped into awakened love, the answer lies in your body, in your soul's quiet knowing. When you are trapped, you feel drained, anxious, constantly questioning your worth, endlessly trying to prove yourself. When you are awakened, you feel calm at the core. Even when there is conflict, you do not fear abandonment, for you have met the abyss and survived it. You do not confuse suffering with devotion, for you have tasted true devotion in your own self. But beware, the shadow is cunning. Even after awakening, it will try to seduce you back into old patterns. It will whisper that perhaps this time will be different. Perhaps this one will change. You must be vigilant. You must ask yourself again and again, is this love expanding me or consuming me? Is this empathy born of the self or of the wound? If it is the wound, walk away, no matter how much it hurts. If it is the self, stay, no matter how much it challenges you, for awakened love is not easy. But it is true, the empaths who refuse this path will continue to suffer, and their suffering will not only destroy them, but ripple outward into the world. Children will inherit the same wounds. Societies will normalize the same patterns. Whole cultures will sanctify martyrdom in the name of love. This is why I say my warning is dark, for the stakes are not only personal but collective. To awaken as an empath is to become a healer not only of yourself but of the human story. Do you see now the gravity of your choice? You stand at the threshold between repetition and transformation, between slavery and sovereignty, between illusion and truth. No one can choose for you. The unconscious will offer its mirrors, its dreams, its pattern, but only you can decide whether to remain bound or to awaken. And so I leave you with this. Love is not meant to destroy you. Empathy is not meant to enslave you. The one who wounds you is not your destiny. They are your teacher, your mirror, your shadow in flesh. Honor the lesson, then release the bond, step into the abyss, and there you will find not death but life. There you will find the self. There you will find the love you have sought all along, not in the arms of another, but in the eternal center of your being. When you stand in that place, you will no longer ask why you keep loving those who hurt you. You will know the answer, and you will smile, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. For without those wounds, you would never have descended. Without that descent, you would never have awakened. Without awakening, you would never have become whole.